body.
Welcome to Doom Scroll Patrol. Today we're talking about the fires in LA. Obviously, climate change, Israel, Gaza, stuff that's meta nonsense, Biden's farewell address, and of course the TikTok ban. I'm Heron Eggy McKay. That's my name for sure. Heron Eggy McKay. I'm Aaron Heggy McKay.
I'm Hannah Snape.
I'm Sam Perez.
And Harold is around. He's just got to take a call. He'll be back. He's on the shitter. We're gonna talk about Phrenology 2. It's gonna be great. You won't want to miss it.
Barf at 20 degrees up in the mountains. It was pretty rad because the ski workers went on strike just recently. Yep. And disrupted all the rich people, and they got all pissed, and they got everything they wanted, which was
means you're doing something.
It was so funny.
Call Mitt Romney, be like, "What do we do?"
No, for real, they were like calling the governor and shit. They were like, because they were just so mad, and I saw on TikTok all these lines of just rich people in the snow, like standing around, and there's like 5 guys with signs that say like, "All we want is $2."
Exactly.
I'm gonna make you rich, butt fox.
I can always just jump in on LA is burning sort of thing. Friend of ours, Peter Kalmus, who used to live in Altadena, published an op-ed talking about how yes, this is indeed climate change. So let's just get that out of the way, in case you were wondering about the 100-mile-an-hour winds in January, burning the hell out of LA. Maybe the climate has changed. In case you were wondering about that, climate science approved.
Months of drought, 25% drier vegetation, and 100-mile-an-hour winds from the Santa Ana that should not have been going at 100 miles an hour in January. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think part of it was also just because it got last year it was super wet, right? A whole bunch of plants grew up. Then it got super dry, and they all died. So doesn't sound like regular stuff to me. And yeah, we actually do have some analysis now, the 25% of the vegetation drier due to climate change. This is according to the UCLA newsroom. So basically just another, a quarter of the extreme fuel moisture deficit was caused by climate change is what they're saying now. So,
well, also
was
that
climate?
area, it's also supposed to have, controlled burns every year.
That's the other thing.
And that hasn't happened for however long.
You know some folks who do some of the control burns, the traditional good fire. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that is another thing that is around climate change that we've mismanaged everything.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to work on some documentary projects following the Yurok Nation out in California, and they do traditional burning. It's been part of their cultural practices since time immemorial. It was made illegal because, colonization and all that fun stuff. And because of that whole area is overgrown with just, I think one of the main ones, it's like a berry, and I can't remember. I want to say it's some kind of blackberry. It's not native to that area.
It's Swedish berries.
Yeah, and it's just everywhere out there. Because there is that kind of weird lie where they're like, oh yeah, this is what the wilderness looks like. And then they point to pictures of who is it? Is it Ansel Adams who did those photos of nature back in the day? Anyways, which is not true because people have been here forever. And so they're trying to take back cultural burning because it's healthy and it helps the forest and it helps nature. And they actually they started building, they call it, I think the joke is it's the fire station, but it's a station where they go out to start fires. Yeah, exactly. So, kind of fun. And yeah, no, it's something that every area needs, and they've just ignored it. And this is one of the major problems about ignoring this of cultural burning is, I mean, if they would have maintained the burning, I don't know if LA would have burned the way it did.
Burning.
And then of course Jesse Waters and I think we can always say, if you don't know who Jesse Wetters is, it's his job is to make racism. He's the Fox News correspondent who goes out to make new racisms and new racists and find new ways to be
really
racist.
a racism innovator.
He's a racism
He's come
innovator.
up with all different kinds of new racism. I really think you got to take Jesse Waters, like, give him some credit for coming up with new and innovative ways to do racism. I think we should listen to his clip.
Before Donald Trump left office, he signed an order that would funnel more water from Northern California into Southern California. Newsom, instead of saying thank you, filed a lawsuit to stop it, saying it would kill the smelt. If you don't know what a smelt is, neither did we. It's a fish the size of your pinky. California can't get enough water to fight fires because of a stupid fish. But it gets worse. Gavin's been tearing down dams. Why? Because the Indians wanted some of their river back so they could catch salmon. Gavin didn't just knock down one dam for the Indians, he knocked down all 4. And these dams were a go-to source for firefighters to pull water from to fight fires up north. Gavin's literally tearing down Western civilization for fish and Indians. Nothing against the Indians. I love the Indians. But really?
We all just listened to Jesse Waters do some great racism where he blamed the fires on some fish and the Indians.
The Indians, yes, the Indians.
The Indians.
Sorry, there were scare quotes for those of you listening in, and that was specifically the Yurok
we put these scare quotes in Chiron for those of you listening at home.
Monsters do have their place.
Oh, to say, and also too, because a lot of people, like, especially outside of America, if you don't know, the Klamath River is like 600 miles north of LA. Like, it's not even remotely close. Because people are like, well, they could have just piped in the water. How? You fucking idiots. Like,
you got to build a 600-mile pipeline to Los Angeles.
Yeah, through mountainous terrain.
Mountainous terrain to put out the fire, obviously. I just asked ChatGPT how much water the answer that it is going to give me in its data center, and apparently 100 words is about like one of those water bottles. So basically, it's like the 500 milliliter water bottles. I don't know what that is in metric, like a hogshead or whatever. Not metric, but like just the water bottle you get, it's like 100 words. So just anytime you use ChatGPT, that's how much water you're using, and that's what is being built out there in those data. Yeah, on top of agriculture, a lot of the water that is being used in California is powering these giant data centers that is going towards those stupid AI Google search results that you get at the top of it that don't, that's like just take traffic away from people just trying to make a living online. And about 100 words takes 500 milliliters of water to cool those data centers because it's just so much compute power. So basically every time you get it to make your little essay or whatever, that's a whole bottle of water just being thrown out.
That's a whole bottle of water. And every time they force you, when I go to make an email in Gmail, it's like, let me help you write your email. And I'm like, no. Then I get an email and it says, let me tell you what was in the email you just read. And I'm like, I don't. Stop, please go away. And then you go anywhere you go. Yes, and that's where our water's going to go.
Now I am become death.
I think we just need to acknowledge, though, that our companies need more male energy if they really want to succeed, right? I mean, Which
is rich coming from Zuckerberg. That looks like a fucking haunted doll. Like, get the fuck out of here, dude. You're not.
I don't know. I think the comparisons with Data are a little also unfair because, like, Data had a soul.
Data had a soul, and Data had
think about it. Data had a soul.
Yeah,
and
Data had ethics.
I don't know.
I don't ethically driven.
I don't know a lot about Star Trek, but I know Data fucks. So
I think we need alpha lesbians. I think that actually will fix most problems.
I think all lesbians are alpha. They just don't talk about it because they know that they are alpha.
In fact, some of them are even sigma.
At the present time, it is of paramount importance that the women and girls of our country be given training so that they may do their share in the war of emergency.
Speaking of Israel, Gaza,
Yes, speaking of Israel, Gaza. Well, I was thinking more the way into this, which is as we await with great dread in our bellies Trump 2 coming in, that the numbers are here, and there's a very good chance that it was Harris's unwillingness to break from Biden on the supporting the genocide in Gaza that brought us Trump. That there was some polling that basically a third of the people who voted for 20 for Biden who didn't vote for Harris said that the ending Israel's violence in Gaza was a main factor. That was the main factor. This was not that close an election. It was not particularly close. That means that the commitment to sending bombs to bomb children was apparently worth more than what they keep saying. The state of democracy in America and the world, all of this is the most important thing. Well, obviously it wasn't. Obviously it wasn't. Blowing up kids in Gaza was more important than stopping Trump. That's unambiguous. That's what we know. That's what we know their values are. That's what we know where their priorities are. And for what? For Netanyahu, who clearly continued it partly to get Trump elected. Like, that's the thanks, right? It just, the fury I have.
So digging into this, it's like, I mean, obviously, Trump is not going to be great for Gaza either.
No.
And was this just people staying home? Sorry, I didn't.
This was people staying home. This was people staying home. That there was a lot of people who just didn't come out, and that was a third of them was basically because of Gaza, right? And that for a lot of people that was enough reason not to come out. It was like, why am I going to come out and vote for genocide? Fuck it. It's all a terrible disaster.
So the Lancet says new peer-reviewed study used data from the ministry, online surveys, social media obituaries to estimate that there were probably between 55 and 78,000 deaths from traumatic injuries in Gaza at the time that they were studying. Study's best death toll estimate was 64,260, which is 41% more than. And
that's from traumatic injuries. That's not from lack of cancer treatment. That's not from
lack of food.
Deaths resulting from lack of food.
The deprivation that you get from being
the deprivation and everything else. Yeah.
And those numbers also don't include. It doesn't include the estimated up to 10,000 people who are still under the rubble.
Real quick aside, I just saw David Lynch passed away.
Oh.
Something I can make jokes about now, finally. There's like a little meme of David Lynch that makes the rounds every so often. I have it saved on my phone. And perhaps this is apropos to what we were just talking about, which is someday the sadness will end. Today is not that day.
And I think that does apply to like what's going on with Palestine and all that. It's like, yeah, someday the sadness will end. Sadly, it's not today.
Well, yeah. Fucking, they had a deal. Like, okay, so that's the other news, is that there was this deal that was all big. It's like, hey, there's going to be a ceasefire. There's going to be a hostage exchange. And now that we're like, as of this recording, who knows what's happened now? Netanyahu is all out here being like, oh, last minute crisis with Hamas. So we gotta hold things up. We're not going to approve this. And it's like, damn. And so the speculation from Times of Israel columnists is basically just like, well, he needs the, super militant, let's just like nuke Hamas and nuke Gaza part of his coalition to hold his government together, because they're all being like, well, if you support certain aspects of this deal, we're just going to pull support. So for political survival, Netanyahu is backtracking on it, it seems.
Which is what's been the case the entire way.
Very popular, sure. But despite this being a very popular with Israelis, Palestinians were in the streets being like, finally, they're celebrating. Everyone wants this except for a very small group.
But that's been the case really the entire time. Hamas was ready to make deals literally basically days after the October 7th attack. They were ready to make deals, free all of the hostages, do all of this. The entire monstrosity of the last year was Netanyahu, A, wanting for his political survival, and B, wanting to carry out genocide because that's always been part of the plan. So it both kept him safe and do that, and the Biden administration constantly lying about it, that every time this same deal has been on the table and accepted by Hamas, it's every time it's just the same exact story, is that Netanyahu kills the deal and the U.S. backs him up, and the U.S. doesn't and
it's always Hamas's fault.
Always Hamas's fault, although they were ready to make a deal within days of the entire thing happening.
Yeah.
And that means almost basically all of the Israeli hostages would have been freed. All of them. That was a choice. Yeah. So thank you for
So we should
giving us
retire
Trump.
Thanks Obama and do Thanks Hamas, because it's always their fault.
It's
Hamas
always
is
their
everywhere.
fault. Right?
Oh, my kid threw up at the ski lodge today. Thanks, Hamas.
Thanks, Hamas.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your...
Well, Biden, Biden made his farewell address. He was touting this thing, and now that seems to be it seems to be a deal in peril. We'll see what happens in the week, and when we come back, we'll talk about it a little more in development. But maybe did you all see Biden's farewell address? He fucking came out and said, "Beware of oligarchy forming in America." And I'm like, buddy, forming.
Yeah. Also,
but he said the word, which is pretty big. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but it's also like, it's like you did it. You're part of it, man. Like, I don't know. Like, feels like he's kind of to blame in a way.
I think there's, I'm not like an apologist for Biden or anything, but like it is just one office, in a sort of ideal way. Like there's only so much a president can do. The House has, and the Senate has, the courts all have a role to play in this. But then you have giant actors like, you got your Elon Musk coming in and being the head of Doge, and a lot of the money that he has would have been from selling carbon credits due to Biden policies. So yes, of course, Biden has some responsibility in forming the oligarchy, right? And the tech bros that we had before are of course part of American policy. They're a policy choice because they can be taken down through anti-monopoly actions.
I mean, that's the thing is that these
ability to do it.
That companies are less powerful than states because states are the ones who give companies the right to exist. All a state needs to do is say, you no longer exist as a company, and they're fucking gone. Right? So this is like, and that's through anti-monopoly laws, that's through regulations. And this has been a bipartisan thing in the United States, right? There's been the running away of financial regulation, of media regulation, of tech regulation, and allowing these things to go. But clearly the Republicans are the cheerleaders of oligarchy. Like they think it's the best thing ever and they want to promote it to the extreme. But both parties have allowed it to happen. It's happened on both their watches, and the concentration of wealth and power, and again, we just saw it in real time. From the beginning at Facebook, they knew the danger to democracy and human civilization that a platform such as Facebook let wild would do. From the beginning, they knew that very early on. And it's just like the oil companies, they let it rip. And now, again, they know that they could stop disinformation, but they're intentionally letting it rip. I mean, and this is something that's happened on both. This has happened on both watches for sure.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I can't. You can go.
Well, I was just going to ask, what kind of checks and balances is there in American government? I don't know.
Well,
okay.
America, where we make justice.
Yeah, because in Canada, usually we have the minority government. So more than one party has a say when making decisions.
No.
When minorities take over, I know the minorities are just taking over here.
Sounds like you guys got that DEI up there too.
I would say that I know we don't have a whole ton of time for like a history lesson or whatever, but for those of you at home and you don't know about these things, Google the Powell memo. I believe that's what it is. And there was so after World War II, there's the Bretton Woods Conference. The United States becomes like the dominant world power. It kind of agrees to this global world order where the monetary reserve is going to be the greenback, the U.S. dollar. The New Deal happens in between then and the Depression, and there's kind of this whole Keynesian order of economic trade backed by the U.S. military to try to fight the Russians And that kind of all starts to crumble in the 1970s. There's an energy crisis, and out of that comes neoliberalism. And I feel like we're kind of at the very end of like the neoliberalism, everything is freedom, giant globalization, industrialization, everywhere kind of thing. And it's being replaced with something far, far worse.
Something is coming.
And the Powell memo came out in the early 70s, and it was explicitly how to claw back what was happening because of the 60s and the GI Bill that got working class people in college educations. And the fundamental line
very
was
popular programs.
You needed to that an educated workforce was a potentially non-compliant workforce and a rebellious workforce, and you needed people stupider and less educated, and that
there was too much democracy happening.
There was too much democracy and education was part of that. And like always, they always managed to find a way to grift off it. And that's why college education now leads to bankruptcy, and that you need to work the rest of your life to try and pay off your student loans, because then you're not thinking about being uppity and rebellious. The things that we've gone wrong in this country have been long planned, and the Powell memo is part of that, and the Southern strategy by Nixon, which was to bring the racism formally into the Republican Party, and everything that Reagan did. I mean, yeah, this has all been planned. You know, it's not a conspiracy. It's all quite out in the open, right?
Well, it's not a conspiracy if it's not a crime. Like literally, by definition, it has to be a crime to be a conspiracy. They're like, yeah, we're doing this. It's like Project 2025. It's like, no, we're just doing this. It's going to be totally legal. It's lawful evil. If you ever play D&D, that's the sort of on that little grid.
Which is the worst kind of evil.
The worst kind of evil. Worst kind of evil.
We can cut this back into the other thing. There's actually, on kind of an interesting note on the Gaza front, there's a new film called From Ground Zero, which is a series of films about Gaza by Gazans and Palestinians. That's shortlisted for an Oscar. Michael Moore actually stepped up as an executive producer. But in a world right now where Palestinian voices and stories are being silenced over and over and over again, and that's true in both parties, and that's true, you know, how many people have died due to explosions from unknown causes in Gaza. If you read the headlines, you know, X hundred people died from bombs dropped by somebody. You know, Israel's never granted the agency as the killer, and the Palestinian stories are just obliterated. So this is a film that actually, if it can get seen and get watched more, is actual Palestinian voices raised up about Gaza. So From Ground Zero is what it's called. It's in theatrical release now in the US. I don't know if it's up in Canada. I'm sure it's going to be streaming soon. But sometimes watching a movie and getting other people to watch a movie is because stories are critical. Like, Palestinians are human, and they're frankly not treated like humans. They're not treated by humans by most of the governments in the world right now. They're not treated by most of the media. So watching stories and hearing stories about people and their own voices is an act of resistance.
Kind of a simple.
So TikTok is being banned in the United States. That there's not a deal, but like, I think one of the things that like people are doing now is like showing stuff that happened on TikTok that they remember, and it sort of hit me when you're talking about that. There was Medo Halimi. He was 19. He was like one of these guys who was talking about life in the tents in Gaza. And he was killed in August, and like this is one of those things where like, you know, he had like 250,000 followers, and he's like, it's really one of those literal like on the ground, like showing you what life is like, but also in like a really kind of hopeful way. And it was really a gut punch when he died for a lot of people. And and now TikTok is not going to be a thing in the United States. So what are your all takes on that, guys?
So you guys should all learn Mandarin.
Yeah, we're all going to be on Red Note now.
Yeah.
We're all going to be on...
Good thing I already know Mandarin, even though I'm in Canada.
Wait, do you actually?
Yeah, well,
you know some Mandarin?
What did you just say to me?
I just said I speak a little Mandarin.
Oh, okay. What'd you call me? All I know is Guaylo. I think that's my name in Mandarin.
Well, clearly,
I thought Guaylo was like
Guaylo
like
doesn't sound Mandarin.
I think Guaylo is like White Devil or something.
Yeah,
like
I thought it was.
In other words, that's his
I
name.
usually know. I'll say I know most. I know most racist words towards white people in like a lot of languages, and that's why I was like,
it's a little hobby of yours.
Yeah,
it's a little hobby of yours to know the slurs in other languages for white people.
Yeah, so when you said, "Well," I was like, wait, no." I mean, yes, but also no.
I do think it's pretty clearly that part of the thing about TikTok is that they weren't in control of the conversation, and one of the reasons that young people are much clearer about what's going on in Gaza is because they were getting straight from people from Gaza and from other political sources on TikTok. And that's one of the places where people actually figured out what was going on. And that was clearly one of the dangers of it.
Knowledge is power.
I was thinking about this morning, because I was seeing a lot of like TikTok feed is a lot of like, this is what it's like on Red Note, and like people just being really friendly and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, I wonder if like a lot of higher ups in the government are just like kind of shitting themselves right now, because between this and then with what happened with Luigi, and like there's this awakening of like, oh, like CEOs are bad, and then also like what else have they lied to us about? Well, obviously Chinese people. It's almost like there's these bigger cultural awakenings, and I hope they keep going. But I don't know. I found it interesting because when that happened with Luigi, everyone's like, no, it's bad. It's really bad. And everyone's like, no, it isn't. This was awesome. Like, we need more of it. And now with Red Note, like the last 2 days, people are like, they're like, yo, man, these Chinese people are great. Like, they're so welcoming. And like, what else have they lied to us about? So you're right. It's like this narrative that's been spun for ever is starting to be undone because of social media and just like talking to other people or seeing other people.
I just wanted to ask, were there people being like, I was told all Chinese people are bad people? Like, it's just like, there's a difference between like a people and their government or whatever. You can like disagree what the government does, but like generally most people are going to be like, more or less, there's going to be assholes everywhere. But
they
like,
also
you
thought,
can't be like,
they also
Chinese
thought
people
that
are bad people.
They were convinced that China was just full of people dressed in gray, trudging miserably through every day of life because it was so repressive and so awful. Now, this is not in defense of the Chinese government. I'm not defending the Chinese government, but it's a functioning ancient country where people live their lives. It's not like there's this cartoonish version of China. And if you're listening particularly to right-wing media and Trump and all that, that it's just this nightmarish scenario. And that it's so that's really what the propaganda was this cartoonized version of a miserable, horrible existence every day where the government monitors every syllable that you speak, and that's what people are starting to be like, oh no, they're actually just human beings and people, and some of them are kind of cool.
Well, I mean, and the only, like, all of that shit is dumb, but the only actual thing I've ever heard from anyone that seems legitimate is like the social scale, the social ratings that they have there. But that's exactly,
there's a social credit system.
It's exactly the same as like credit scores here. Like, it's essentially the same function. So I don't know.
I think there is some difference. There is some difference between like you can be denied a bank loan in the United States when these private companies tell you you can like, but in China it's like, oh, if you have a low enough credit score, you're not allowed to ride this train. I am looking forward to Mark Zuckerberg's social credit system because that one's free and capitalist.
I propose we stimulate the economy.
I always look forward to new innovations in racism. It's always my favorite thing. Is like, when someone comes up with a new racist idea, I'm like, yeah, this is good. Like,
it seems to be,
this is what this country's all about.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the industries that just completely, it's just on the track up.
Maybe that's what we should do. How do we monetize racism? Let's get on that train.
I think we are the first people to have thought about that. What if we convince everyone that a certain population of a certain skin color is morally and physically inferior, but able to do better work for us on our farms? And we import them on our... I have some boats. They're rickety, a little rickety, but they can go around the Horn of Africa real well.
And if there's anything you require, please don't hesitate to scream.
Racism.
Speaking of the old racism, I would do phrenology on Jesse Waters. I'd study his head.
Sam, if you don't know, Sam is a world-renowned phrenologist.
I am. Actually, that should be my title.
If you're just listening at home and you can't see the chyron, it says Sam, world's best phrenologist Perez.
Yeah, that's me. I'm really good at it. I love studying white people's heads.
Tell me about the buffs.
Studying white people's heads.
What they really made.
Yeah, when I went and saw Harold in New York when he wasn't looking, I was just like rubbing his head. I'm like, yes.
And as an inferior white person, he can't really tell the difference between.
I was confused by what was happening. I just started scratching my ear.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think that
this ridge lets me know that you work a lot.
Yeah, I do think that the phrenology on Jesse Waters is more of the whoops upside his head phrenology school.
I'll get my little those hooks, just put them on his head and squeeze them, see what happens.
Somehow I wouldn't be surprised if Jesse Waters has the reverse Cro-Magnon, where it's like instead of like, the sloping brow, it's just like the back somehow slopes, and it's just this weird sort of like kind of like when a whale is in captivity and like their fin sort of slips over. It's just that's the back of his head.
Yeah, and then I'll just like poke it and be like, yes, this is where the racism is.
I think we should try. We should try fusing acupuncture and phrenology, and see if you poke certain areas, if it changes who they are as a person.
I smell burnt toast.
Does this make you more or less racist?
Look, I'm trying to research
poke him and be like, what do you think about Romani?
Suspiciously, it's very hard to find a picture.
I love Ray Romani.
It's very hard to find a picture of the back of Jesse Waters' head. So I think you may.
That's suspicious.
Something. Why are they hiding the back?
What doesn't he want us to know?
I think there's a parasite on the back of his head that's going to eventually turn into an evil.
He doesn't want me to see his racism ridge on the back of his head.
Undeniable.